Hi, I'm Sophie from Random House. I'm Assistant Social Media Director here at Random House Group. I can see you guys coming in. We are momentarily going to be going live with Benjamin Dreyer, Copy Chief at Random House and author of DREYER'S English, which just came out in paperback yesterday. We're super excited to have Ben, so we're just going to go ahead and wait for his request to come in a second, and we will get him on here. Hi!
Hi.
Hello, how are you? I mean, you just saved me from having to do dramatic readings of your
Oh,
card.
well, good. Can you see me and hear me?
I can see you and hear you. How are you?
I'm okay. Hi, Sophie.
So good to see you.
And you?
So for those of you who don't know, Benjamin is not just our copy chief at Random House. He's also a Random House author, which is really exciting for us. It's kind of a perfect situation. And so we're just so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I keep seeing the comments and I'm seeing that somebody's wine drinking and I'm thinking, well, why aren't I wine drinking?
Honestly, I mean, it's 12 to 5 o'clock in quarantine, so
Yes.
seems
And
reasonable.
yet I'm working. Hello.
Hi, well, why don't we just jump right in? Can you tell us a little bit about your job at Random House?
Sure. I am the copy chief and the managing editor of the Random House division of the mighty Penguin Random House empire, which means I'm focused on some but not all of the imprints in the corporation. So the Random House imprint is one that I work with, and Crown and Ballantine and Bantam and Dell and Del Rey and the Dial Press and the Modern Library, which is the oldest part of our group. And my job is basically very simply to make sure that all of our books are published on time. And of course, I collaborate with lots of people in lots of other departments to make sure that that happens. And then specifically as the copy chief, my job is to make sure that they are all published as well as they can possibly be published, with, whenever possible, no mistakes whatsoever.
And now, Benjamin, tell the people, how long have you been doing this job at Random House?
I started at Random House in 1993 as a production editor. At a certain point, a number of years later, and I always like to admit that for a person whose job includes scheduling, I can't ever remember dates.
Well, the time is very...
At a certain point, I became the copy chief and the managing editor, which I have been now for, I think, the better part of a decade.
Amazing. And what are some of your favorite parts of the job? Because that you have one of those huge sort of like all-encompassing jobs. Like I feel like so many things come into your department, especially like from us on the marketing side, like things we don't even think about. Like what are some of your favorite parts?
I mean, the thing is, what I do now is a great big juggling act with all sorts of books. I mean, hundreds of original titles every year, and always in the midst of conversations with people in editorial, with people in marketing, with the people in publicity, trying to make sure that everybody has the information they need. One thing, to be perfectly honest, that I miss a little bit is that back when I was a production editor, I used to work on individual titles. This was my book. I looked over to make sure that the copy editing was done and the proofreading was done. And I don't do that anymore. I mean, I have my hands in all of our books, but not in the intimate way that I used to. But I still derive a huge amount of pleasure from making sure that our books are published well and beautifully. And I still really do relish the interactions that I get to have with our authors, because occasionally I get pulled in to answer a question or to settle a brawl. And I think that always it's going to be the fact that I work in service of authors that I would call the best part of my job.
What is a copy editing brawl that come up at some point? Like what's a big
I'm sorry, what is the copy editing?
debate
Oh, a brawl?
at all?
Every now and then there is just a disagreement between what an author thinks is best, and authors often do know what's best because it's their book. But sometimes the copy editor might have a different opinion, and sometimes there are valid reasons to say, author person, we might want to go in a different direction here. So every now and then I'm pulled in as the little bit of extra muscle in the conversation.
I think That makes sense.
Yeah.
How did you get your jobs? How did you get your job at Random House? How did you start in this industry? Was this your first publishing job, or you had been somewhere else before this?
No, Random House is the only publishing house I have ever worked for.
What?
And it was about 1990 or so, and I had moved back to New York City from Chicago, where I'd gone to college and stayed there because I loved Chicago. But here I was, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, and it was time to decide what it is that I wanted to do. And a friend of mine, a published writer, um, thought that I might make a good proofreader, and so he introduced me to one of his people at St. Martin's Press, which was down in the Flatiron Building in those days. And I started doing this sort of freelance work, and I was working for St. Martin's Press, and eventually I was working for Random House too. And at a certain point, the wonderful person who was the copy chief at Random House and the managing editor before I became that said, "There's a job open. Would you like to join the staff?" And I thought, sure.
Yeah.
So it was entirely by accident, and I sort of wandered into it, and I think it was a very lucky accident for me. I'm happy with how it worked out.
It worked out for everyone's benefit, for sure.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, that's a lot of years to go through, but what have been some of your favorite projects, some of the most fun things to work on over the years?
I mean, I've had a lot of I've had a lot of wonderful work with a lot of wonderful authors on a lot of wonderful books. I mean, there was a long string of time when I worked with Peter Straub on maybe a half dozen of his books. I worked with Michael Chabon on, I think, 3 of his books. The most wonderful thing for me, really, was being the production editor working on The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. Which even as I was working on it, I mean, I remember occasionally I would go running into his editor's office, and I would say, "Kate, you know how people talk about the great American novel? Well, there really is such a thing, and this is it."
Wow, coming from you, that's really big.
And that was wonderful. And he, as I'm happy to report, most of the really great authors I have had the privilege to work with over the years are also lovely people, cooperative, interested. I mean, I would spend hours on the phone with Michael when we were working on the book because, you didn't have email in those days. If you needed to have a lot of communication, you'd get on the phone. And there wasn't a comma in the book that he didn't want to discuss if I wanted to discuss it. That's how interested he was. So it was lovely. I mean, more recently, there is now only one living author whose copy editor I am, and I have been Elizabeth Strout's copy editor since the Burgess Boys.
This is I'm a huge Elizabeth Strout fan. This is like my favorite fact about you. Please just talk about Elizabeth Strout for like the next 20 minutes.
Okay. Well, I was asked whether I wanted to come out of retirement, copy editing retirement, to copy edit the Burgess Boys. And Liz's editor at the time, our wonderful and late colleague, Susan Campbell, explained to Liz that, well, I didn't really copy edit anymore, but that she would ask me.
Ooh. It's like, no.
So she asked me. So I thought, I think I can find some time to do this. And so I copy edited the Burgess Boys, and it was a glorious experience because I had not done it in such a long time. And I have to give Liz credit for one thing. It was getting back to work on copy editing that reminded me of how much I loved to copy edit, which then led irrevocably and absolutely and positively to the fact that I decided to write the book that I wrote.
I love that.
Yeah, but to go back to Liz, I have worked with her on the Burgess Boys. My name is Lucy Barton. Anything is possible. Most recently, I did Olive again, which was an amazing experience. I had not worked on the first Olive Kittredge book, But of course, I had read it like everybody, like everybody did, and that was when I became a big fan. So to be able to, to be able to work on Olive again was an amazing, amazing thing for me to do. So
Like, here's a Pulitzer Prize winning author. Would you like to come out of retirement to edit her next book? It's like,
yeah,
like, yeah.
so it was a real. I mean, it's a real. The thing is, it's a real treat. It's fun. She's a great writer, all by herself without any assistance from me. But it is fun to dig in and to do the things that copy editors do, just that sort of polishing and refinement and asking good questions, and every now and then asking a question that inspires an author to rethink a passage. It's a lovely conversation that goes on the page, and it's a great pleasure for me. So yeah.
That's wonderful. For anyone just joining us, we're here with Ben Dreyer, the author of DREYER'S English and our copy chief at Random House. Ben, what are some of your personal favorite books?
I mean, things I haven't worked on?
It can be things you've worked on. Those can overlap. But
well,
no,
when it comes time to talk about favorite books, I do like to say, okay, let's get out of my work experience so that there aren't authors who are thinking, why didn't he mention me?
Oh yeah, no favorites.
Does he not like me? But I mean, over time, I would say that my favorite writer, and this is scarcely new material to anybody who knows me even a little. My favorite writer of fiction is Shirley Jackson, who everybody knows from reading The Lottery in high school, because I think it's an American law that you have to read The Lottery in high school, and which is when I certainly first read her, and then always read her and read her and read her. So if she's my favorite writer, my favorite work of hers is The Haunting of Hill House, which I guess means that The Haunting of Hill House is my favorite book.
Oh, big statement from you. I love that.
Yeah, but one thing that happened that was great, and since I happen to have a copy sitting right here.
Please.
Is a few years ago, we acquired a collection of material of Shirley Jackson's that had either never been published or had never been collected. And I said before that Liz is the only living author I work with, because I got to work with a dead author. And I got to copy edit Shirley Jackson's material, which was the most surreal kind of dream, to think that I was copy editing my favorite writer, who had been my favorite writer for decades, who had also been dead for 50 years.
God, that is so interesting, because then you can't really have that dialogue with them. It's like, I'm going to edit Emily Brontes, like, Undiscovered.
How's that work? Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, well, first, I did have a conversation with the two of her adult children who were the book's editors, and to let them know how much I respected their mother's voice and how well I knew their mother's voice. And so we were all in agreement that I could handle this project. But I also had to set my own parameters, and basically I thought, I will do as little as I possibly can. I will tinker with punctuation if I think that's a good idea. Maybe a word in, maybe a word out. But the truth is, this material, and it was an amazing thing to find out, is a lot of the material, the unpublished material, were first drafts that she had typed up and put back in a drawer, and that was the last work she did on them. And I'm telling you, this was good, clean, brilliant writing that did not need to be overhauled. It just needed to be dusted off a little bit. So it was an amazing experience. I mean, and think about things that you couldn't have ever imagined could possibly happen. But I mean, I love Shirley Jackson. I love Charles Dickens. I love Edith Wharton. Another writer I love of nonfiction, who amazingly has been a great influence on the voice that I attempted to concoct as a writer.
Yes.
The cookbook writer Peg Bracken, who's most famous for writing a book called The I Hate to Cook book.
Oh, God. that
It is,
book.
it is one of the best narrative voices I have ever encountered in the history of reading. And all I used to think was, if I could cultivate a voice as as personable and clear and funny as Peg Bracken's, then wow, wouldn't I have accomplished something? And she's a writer I aspire to write like.
That's incredible.
It's a great book. Anybody who wants to see a picture of mid 20th century domestic art and surreptitious feminism should check out the I Hate to Cook book. It's absolutely amazing.
I read that for my personal home. I think that book was written for me, and I'm very excited to purchase it this
Yeah,
afternoon.
yeah.
What are some upcoming projects you're really excited about?
Um,
And to talk about your own, because you do have some great upcoming projects.
yeah. I mean, right now, and it's a funny thing, and I should have taken some notes because every time somebody ever asks me about, oh, what's going on in the house that you find interesting, I go absolutely blank. It's like I can remember it while I'm working, and then as soon as I stop to have a conversation, it all flies completely out of my mind. So maybe we'll set that aside for now.
Don't worry.
Um, but I am right now. I am. Well, let's see. There's a lot of things happening that I don't have to do anything about except to enjoy them. The Stet game, of course, has been on sale for a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Yep.
The lovely people at Rizzoli.
Can I truly
Um,
know about this? Guys, these cards are the funniest things I have ever read. You might think that you are trying to encourage your family or friends to just play a game about grammar. No, these are the funniest things I've. It's like playing Cards Against Humanity, but it's a card game for grammar. So you're going to learn and laugh your butt off. It's amazing.
well, I really want to give a lot of credit to, and you'll see her name on the front page of the instruction booklet when it was time to get the game going, in the production process. Um, I was asked whether or not I wanted the assistance of another writer to help craft the game because it's a complicated thing. And a friend of mine, name of Yolanta Benal, who is she's one of the great copy editors of the English language. B, Sophie, you met her.
Did I?
Yolanta was the one
Dog
who
trainer.
visited the day that Robert and I met Sally. Remember my friend, the dog trainer?
I remember. She's amazing.
Well, she's also a great dog trainer. And we asked her to be the writer. And she did an amazing job, and it's very funny because I looked at of course they showed me what she did. What do you think of it? What do you think? And I had like little refinements here and there, but the thing is, she sounds more like me than I do.
That's like the best friend possible.
Exactly. So all right, so we got the game.
Yes.
The lovely Rizzoli people are bringing out a desk calendar, which I think goes on sale maybe a week from yesterday.
Nice.
I am working with the people in the children's division at Penguin Random House on a version of Dreyer's English that is tailored for middle grade readers, which I've been working on for the last few months. And that's been a really exciting, I think, project. And then I am now at work on a second book called Dreyer's Fiction, in which I will be basically showcasing lots of wonderful bits of writing that I have loved over the years. So you will see Dickens, you will see Edith Wharton, you will see Liz Strout, you will see Shirley Jackson. You'll probably see a little Peg Bracken because I'm going to slip it in, even though she's a nonfiction writer. And it's not, it's not going to be a work of literary criticism because that's not what I do. I simply want to analyze and discuss how these writers do what they do and how their writing works for the reader and what we as readers and also writers can learn. It's like, let's look at a Dickens paragraph and how does it work? And what can we steal from him when we go off to do our own writing?
That's just fantastic. I think One of the most interesting things about working in publishing is learning about how copy editing and regular editing sort of fit together to shape the narrative. Like they're not these separate hands. Like it all really fuels together to make a book as good as it is. The idea that it's just like copy is changing a comma here and a comma there. It's so much more complex than that to just improve the narrative, improve the story, improve the storytelling, and like the vehicle of getting what the author and the editor want to get across.
Yes, and it's a lot about listening. It's one thing that I have learned over the years, and maybe I wasn't as good at it at the beginning as I have become over the years, because when you first start out and you're a copy editor, and maybe even because you're not so sure of your skills, you get a little bossy and a little pushy, and you want to tell everybody else what's better. And what you learn over time, if you're a good copy editor, and I like to think I'm a good copy editor by now, is that you have to listen to what the writer is trying to do. You have to listen and figure out what the voice is, which is why I always say if you're going to copy edit a manuscript, the best thing to do is to read the first 25 or 30 or 40 pages with your hands firmly behind your back. Don't pick up your pencil. Don't start writing notes in the margins until you have actually listened to what the writer is doing. And when it really works, you can really get into an author's head. And as I always like to say, you're simply trying to help the author do what the author would have done had the author not already read every sentence in the book 500 times. It's like you're really trying to get into the author's brain. One of the nicest compliments that Elizabeth Strout ever paid me was to tell me of a particular passage that was thorny in one of the manuscripts, and she couldn't quite figure out what to do with it or what was the matter with it. And she stopped and she let it go because she thought, Benjamin will figure it out.
Ooh.
And I did. And the thing is, all I needed to be was not her.
That's incredible the way you talk about that, like especially working with an author like that through so many books, the relationship you form. So
Yeah.
you understand what she's trying to do.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's one of the things about the sort of the intimacy that has grown between the two of us, and we have a working relationship very much unlike most copy editors and writers in the world because we talk to each other. It's I mean, because of the way things work, basically it's usually the copy editor is over there, the author is over there, and that's just how it goes. But she and I actually get to interact, so we do literally finish each other's sentences now.
That your time. Ask one last question, which is any advice for aspiring publishing professionals looking to sort of take a similar path to what you've taken and get into this side of the industry?
I think that and I mean the thing is like I wandered into the publishing industry because back in the early 90s you could do that. And you can't really do that anymore. And I do always try to be to be helpful to people who are aspiring to work in the publishing industry, to answer questions for them whenever I can. But do your internships, you know, take your publishing courses. If you want to be a freelance copy editor or a proofreader working for a company like Penguin Random House, there are wonderful like School of Continuing Education courses in how to do that sort of work well. And find your way in the door and be, be personable and be listen and love what it is that you want to do. I know that's sort of kind of vague and airy-fairy, but that's the best advice I can give right now.
It definitely echoes something we've heard, I think, from a lot of inside the houses when this is sort of a combo author inside the house with someone who works here. One is just really the passion of people here and really loving the industry and loving books is the fundamental thing that brings us all together.
Yeah, I mean, I used to say, I mean, I used to go to an office, and now I guess I don't. But I used to say most days I arrive at the office with a smile on my face, and I leave the office with a smile on my face because I do love my job. And now I basically just walk to the desk, but it's kind of the same thing. And most days, it's a series of wonderful events, and all in the cause of making great books. So it's nice.
That is a wonderful place to end. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Dreyer's English is now available in paperback. Stet is out now. You can definitely follow Ben BC Dreyer, I believe, on Twitter. Yep. He is just truly one of the best follows you can make, and this will be available in our feed for all of you to watch in case you missed part of it. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much, Ben.
Thank you, Sophie.
Bye.
Bye.